CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.
Hi everyone, welcome to CollabTalk, a new talk series up by Collaborative ABA Services that provides information and resources about autism and everything in between. I am Alicia, the founder of Collaborative ABA Services. I'm here with some of our amazing team members.
I'm Katie, I'm an occupational therapist.
I'm Brianna, I'm a BCBA.
I'm Meg, I'm a registered behavior technician.
So today, we're going to talk more about what you should know when looking for the right ABA provider. Often, families receive a referral for ABA therapy and are then faced with the challenge of finding a program for their child or loved one. Many may have limited knowledge about what ABA is or what it involves. To support caregivers and providers who are new to this process, we'll be sharing some key things to consider when searching for an ABA provider. Please keep in mind that this episode is not meant to critique or endorse any specific providers. Our goal is to simply offer guidance and support for those that are just beginning their journey for ABA services. So team, so some things to kind of consider. I want to bring up the first one is staffing. So I know a lot of times with staffing, every ABA agency might be different. They might have different types of staff on board. For example, they might have like a BCBA or board certified behavior analysis who's a master's level certified provider that may oversee the different programming. And then I know like they also might have what they call a board certified assistant behavior analyst who works under the guidance and supervision of the board certified behavior analyst to oversee cases. And then under them is usually what we call a registered behavior technician, or some agencies might just call them behavior technician or ABA therapist.
Yeah.
Right. So they have different terms for that. So in regards to like with staffing, what do you guys think are some key things for families to consider?
I think the difference, right? So a behavior technician may have some background in ABA, but they don't have an actual certification like a registered behavior technician. They have a little bit more training, so they need a 40-hour training course. They need to then take competencies and then be supervised by an actual BCBA. So I think it's just knowing kind of like what the difference is and the education that goes around with it.
And I think for staffing too, thinking of like when you're looking for a program, like what is the staffing for your child? Like, are you with the same BT? Do you have a team of BTs? Are you with the same BCBA? Because I know that different programs in different places will staff their clients differently. So if you're, if you have a child that really needs consistency, making sure that you can find a place where they have the staffing to have a BT that's consistently with your child, versus if your child's a little more flexible, a program that offers multiple BTs per kid could be okay. Like that could work.
And you also bring up a good point. Also, while we're talking about staffing, I think it's okay for families to ask the credentials of the staffing that is working with their child, because that is an important point, and it's not, you being offensive. You have a right to know what are the credentials of this professional working with my child. And the other important piece in regards to staffing is it's also okay to ask the agency, like, what are your hiring practices? What does training look like for this provider? Because I know, like, for me as a parent, one of the things I might want to ask is, do you do background checks? Because when you think about it, in working in the field, especially with children or people with disabilities, there are about vulnerable population, and so I would want to make sure that they also do background checks, especially if they're going into your home. So that is a big one. Any other key points that you guys can think of to consider as far as staffing?
Something we were talking about being supervised by a BCBA and the requirements for that. I know by the board it's 5% for an RBT being supervised by a BCBA, but some insurances might require a little bit more.
Right, and you bring up a good point, and that is true. Like as far as insurances, some insurance providers may require what they call a 10-to-1 ratio, or 10% of the hours worked by a behavior technician. So what that might look like is if a behavior technician is with your child for 10 hours a week, that BCBA should really be supervising out and actually working with that behavior technician a minimum of 1 hour a week. So just some things to kind of consider as far as staffing, like how often that BCBA will be present in supervision. So that's also a valid point. So another thing to consider is also, what is the approach to treatment? And for you guys, when you think about approach to treatment and you have someone that's looking for an ABA provider, I think one of the things is kind of considering or maybe asking them, like, how do you guys provide treatment in regards to, like, is it, do you guys do like different modules or modulities of ABA? Like, for example, is it just discrete trial instruction where it's like repetitive learning of a skill, or do you guys also do natural environment teaching? Do you guys do like what they call like the Denver model?
Right.
What are your approach to treatment? What are some other thoughts around that?
Also, like, where is the treatment taking place? So is it clinic-based? Is it home-based? Do they do community outings? Because, a lot of our clients sometimes need a little bit of assistance in the community and learning some of those skills or generalizing the skills to the actual community setting. So where will the treatment take place?
Also, school consult, collaborating like kind of across environments with different settings and people.
And I think listening to the parents, like you mentioned, and seeing like where do they really need the most support. Like if it's a child that really needs support at home for life skills or for transitions, or in the community with, say, like, social interactions or behavior, having the services provided in that environment makes the most sense. If you find a place that is only clinic-based, but that doesn't really match what you're looking for your kid, then that might not be the best setting for you.
Right.
Speaking of support, parent training too. Do they offer parent training?
Absolutely.
That's a good point. So the next thing is, another thing to consider is really asking the provider, what are the expectations for therapy? Because I know like different providers may have different requirements. For example, some providers may have a minimum of hours that the family has to commit to maintain the services. And so I think like those are some of the questions to ask, and those expectations for therapy really should be provided to the parents at the beginning of treatment, before they even start treatment, so that there is a clear understanding of what is expected from the parent as well as what is expected from the provider.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, this is really what I'm looking for. This is what I want. Do you have this? Do you offer this? Or if you're looking at the treatment plan and you're like, hey, like, why are these goals on here? Like, just being comfortable, being okay to ask those questions and be open to it. I think really any provider that you find that has an open dialogue with their parents, is open to feedback and listening, is really a place that you want to be. I think it would be tricky if you went to a place and they weren't open to the families, or they weren't listening or answering questions. Whether or not they're a good or not good quality provider, that question piece involving the parents is the biggest part, I think.
Because I think that another thing to really think about and keep in mind too is, yes, the therapy is for the client or whoever we're dealing with, but it's also the family, right? Like, especially for in-home, like, we are there in your home and we are trying to help you as much as possible. So if they aren't involving you, I think, and it's something you want to be involved in, I think it's important to speak up, because it is usually your child or a family member. So I think that's important.
And I think access to like those documents, access to the data collection. And, when there are assessments, the parent interviews, being involved in those assessments, giving your feedback and your input to help develop those programs.
And like you mentioned before, the parent training too, if they offer parent training, how often you're expected to attend parent training. That's really important to keep in mind too.
And you reminded me when you mentioned the staffing piece too, like, what are minimum or requirements for the program that you're going to in order to be able to do it? Like, if your child doesn't need, say the 40 hours a week services that some places provide, but that's a requirement, that may not be the best place. Like, kind of finding a clinic or a provider that can match the number of hours that your child needs and how to best support their programming.
Right. Or what best fits the family situation or whatever, if you have other children or other obligations, it might be hard to do 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I've had families where they have been able to drive their kid to a clinic, so the clinic setting has been super beneficial. Like, their child is of school age, so they get after school and they go to the clinic. Or I've had some families where they have, say, like, an au pair, and then they're at home so that the family works later, so then the kids can be getting their services while the parents are still at work.
Those are all valid and good points. So at the next question, and kind of piggybacking on what Meg mentioned before about the data collection, another thing to consider is, how is data collected, and also, is it shared with families? And that's something to definitely be able to consider and ask your provider, because with ABA, the behavior technicians are supposed to collect data for every session, because we are considered scientifically based. A lot of our decisions are based on the data that is collected, and the only way, like as BCBAs, that we're supervising cases to be able to provide those individualized services and see where the child is and if they're meeting those goals is to kind of look at those graphs and that data. So I think that that's a very important piece, is to ask, how is data collected? And also maybe ask, how often is it collected? And how can I view this data, because it should also be readily available to you so that you can also see your child's progress.
And also, like you could always ask too, is there monthly progress reports? Is there a way, I don't know.
To be updated.
Yeah,
right?
like bi-monthly progress reports, or is there a portal that I can log on to and view it? Those types of things.
Right, and some parents want to be very active in like the data collection process, especially with like potty training and sleeping and feeding and those things that happen in the home environment. Me as a parent, I've done data collection with my own child with like the potty training and all of that, and the successes and the prompting and all of that. So the parent training is also a good tool for learning about how the data is collected and how to kind of read the data.
And I think the biggest thing too is that because most ABA clinics go through insurance, the data that's collected, the progress reports, all of those evaluations, they're part of your like private health information. So legally you're able to have access to that no matter what. So if you say like, I've had families that say, oh, email's not really my thing, can you print it out for me? So like you should be able to and can have access to your information, whether it's printed, whether it's emailed, whether it's kind of in a portal, like whatever works best for the family. The providers can be flexible providing you that information.
Right, and parents also have the right to share that information with schools and other providers as well, with the right of information.
And also, I think another important point is to ask the provider, like, what is the timeline of services? Because a lot of times, part of ABA therapy, the first step really should be that intake assessment. And that is the part where the parents should be involved in regards to like getting that background information, helping to develop treatment goals, taking some data to get like some baseline of where the child or the patient is. And I think from the beginning, in taking that information, I would want to know as a parent, okay, after the assessment process, when does the behavior technician come in? Because you don't want to be put in a situation where they don't have the staffing for your child just yet, and they might do the assessment, and then you might be waiting for like months, for example, to start ABA therapy. So that is a very valuable question to consider.
Because I think it depends on state to state, but like I know in our state here in Connecticut, there's a wait list for a lot of ABA clinics because it's in high demand. So I think being honest with, okay, when will my child begin services, I think is important.
And just because they complete the intake doesn't mean that direct services are going to begin right away. It could be another few months, like you mentioned, Alicia.
Speaking of like availability, I was just thinking too, like when changes happen and you're already providing or receiving services and services are being provided, kind of keeping that staff like abreast of changes coming up, like they're starting a sport, or this has changed, or they'll be home earlier. And I know a big one for me is when summer comes. Always looking for more. Always looking for more.
Exactly.
So like get ahead of that, because don't wait till the week before and have the expectations that there's all these available spots to receive more services. Like planning ahead is really important.
Keeping that communication as open as possible.
Right.
Yeah. And also in regards to planning ahead too, like at the beginning of treatment, it's also important and okay to ask about the cost. Because, by law, providers are supposed to be very open and disclose the cost to parents. So definitely I would ask about what is the cost, and also find out if that provider is in your network.
Because I believe that they have to provide something called a good faith estimate, which is they have to provide like what they think it actually will cost, and not just for like per session. Like if you're going to be receiving services for this period of time, this is what your expected cost will be. Just to, you can be an informed consumer basically.
Right.
Picking up on that.
And you can ask those questions.
I think to your point too that you mentioned about like being honest and open or asking questions, I think looking at what kind of other services in the clinic does it provide? Like, do you offer OT? Do you offer speech? Are there other support services? That I've known that some clinics have done ABA, but they've also had social groups run by social workers. So if you're looking for kind of like that one-stop shop that your child can get all of those services, which I know for busy families is really important, asking what else do you provide besides just ABA is also really helpful.
And is there collaboration between those staff too? Because I know some places do offer, maybe they have OT or speech with ABA, but those professionals maybe don't interact a ton to collaborate
at a different time or something like that.
So kind of seeing what that setup is like. Do they collaborate? Are they talking about their child's treatment together?
Or the age of the kids that come. I know here that we have that preschool age, right? So as the OT here, I'm able to kind of push into the classroom and provide more kind of like intervention-based or immediate-based services because the kids are here versus my kids that come in the afternoon, they don't go to the clinic program. So they might be getting ABA or they might be getting other support, but my kind of like connection with them or education is going to be different because they're not here all day.
Right.
Are there any other key takeaways that we want families or even providers to know? Or you guys feel like we kind of hit all the basic points?
I feel like a key takeaway is like ABA is about kind of meeting you where you're at and transparency on both ends.
Yeah, I think just being like, you know, like you mentioned, like the child is the client, but also like the parent's kind of like the customer, right? Like I think there's a big piece of, I used to joke with families all the time that like, you know, yes, I'm here for your kid, but if you didn't drive your kid here, like they wouldn't be coming. So what matters to you and what's important to you as the parent is equally as important to me as like my goals and my treatment. So I think just being comfortable asking. I know it can be uncomfortable if you're not like, you know, well versed in the tech, like, you know, the terms, or this is your first foray into ABA, but just being okay asking like, I want this, or is this possible? I think just makes the whole process more comfortable for you, and then you feel more invested.
Good valid points. All right, team. I think today was definitely very informative and definitely helpful for those families as well as providers that are navigating that journey of trying to find the right ABA provider. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of CollabTalk. If you found this information valuable, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Ding! So you never miss an episode. Got thoughts or questions? Drop them in our comment section. We love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep this conversation going. To learn more about Collaborative ABA Services, visit our website at www.collaborative-abaservices.com. Also, don't forget to check out our additional social media pages, including Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and
TikTok.
Oh, yeah. TikTok. Have a good one.
CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.